your screen sharing, Catherine. Oh, there you go. Hello, welcome everyone.
Welcome everyone. We will wait for a few more people to enter the room and get started in about a minute or so. So welcome, good morning. I see people entering the room. Good morning, everyone. All right, I know we started about 1 minute late, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. For anyone that continues to enter the room, again, we just want to say welcome to everyone. Thank you for being here. This is a Know Your Rights and Best Practices for K-12 schools and educators. So I hope that if you're joining us today, you are either working in a K-12 school, or you are a teacher, an educator, you're somehow involved in a professional setting with K-12 schools. So really excited to have you here so we can talk about knowing your rights as a professional and best practices. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get started with the presentation. My name is Catherine Ramirez Mejia, and I am accompanied by my colleague, Jessica Kiko, who is the Director of Training, and I myself am the Access and Resource Specialist here at Mira Coalition. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, we do invite you to use the Q&A function, and we will do our best to try to respond to questions. So if you are new to Mira Coalition, we are primarily a federal and state advocacy organization, and we also conduct a great deal of organizing throughout Massachusetts. As part of our Mira Coalition membership, we are made up of over 140 organizations throughout Massachusetts that are pro-immigrant. So our vision is a commonwealth and a nation where all can thrive, no matter where they came from or how they got here, and all can fully participate in their community's social, economic, and civic life. So first, I would like to ground us all in knowing the law. So children have the right to public education. In 1982, Flyer versus Doe, the Supreme Court decided that states cannot deny children access to public elementary and secondary education based on their immigration status. So that means that all children can attend school regardless of their own or their parents' actual or perceived national origin, citizenship, or immigration status. And a school district cannot prevent a child from enrolling in or attending school if the parent or guardian chooses not to provide the child's social security number. So it's important that everyone throughout Massachusetts is aware of this and is aware of the right to public education. In addition to that, students and families have the right to language support. So they have the right to language support for students learning English, and parents have the right to qualified interpreters during school meetings and to have documents translated in their preferred language. Parents also have the right to enroll their child in school, even without all required paperwork, if they're living in a shelter or doubled up with another family. Parents also have the right to an evaluation of their child if their child has learning challenges or they're concerned about their child's social or emotional skills compared with children their age. So I'm going to now talk about supporting immigrant students and their families. Again, I would like to welcome anyone who is just joining us. We encourage you to use the Q&A function, and this webinar is being recorded and will be shared out. So with that being said, let's talk about how to support immigrant students and their families. I am very grateful that you are all here today wanting to learn how you can best support immigrant students and their families. But I want to start off by talking about the strengths that you have as educators. So number one, you may already be working closely with immigrant families and have strong connections with them, and thus you might understand the unique needs of your immigrant students and their families. You might also be a trusted individual that they look to for resources, and you are able to hold regular meeting times. Either you're seeing the immigrant student regularly in class, or you're able to have meetings with their parents. And you may be able to communicate in various languages. So really using all the language skills of educators. And you may be able to provide follow-up conversations and additional support. So a lot of the material we're going to be talking about today, you will be there to provide follow-up support and conversation. And so that's why we ask of you that you help us share out the many multilingual resources that we have available on our website to immigrants across Massachusetts. So we understand that this is a time of uncertainty. And before I talk about your rights as a professional working in a K-12 school, I want to take a moment to remind us all to pause and take a deep breath, because there's a lot of information to learn, and it's easier to learn this information when we're not feeling so much anxiety. So really just taking a moment, pausing and breathing. So I come to you as an immigrant myself, but also I'm speaking to you as a professional. And I understand that these topics can be stressful for you as a professional working with immigrant students, but possibly stressful for you if you are an immigrant yourself and a professional. So the best thing that we can do right now in a time of uncertainty is we can learn about our rights as immigrants or our rights as professionals working with immigrants. And we can practice asserting our rights as a professional. We can also understand how to speak with students and families. And we can encourage families to create preparedness plans, which I'm going to talk about later today. And we can learn who to trust for legal advice. So first thing is to really meet immigrant families where they are. Now we have to be reminded that immigrant families may have already been separated from their family members, whether it may have been through immigrating to the United States or any circumstances prior. Because studies show that while immigrating, 75% of children experience separation from a caregiver. So possibly the family has already experienced family separation of a family member. It could be a grandparent, a parent, it could be an aunt and uncle or a sibling, or they may be fearful of family separation at this time. We've heard that some immigrant children and adults are currently fearful of leaving their homes. But that is where I ask you as a professional to keep them connected in all the ways you can So that means checking in with them virtually via phone or text or WhatsApp, and providing home visits when needed or when appropriate, and engaging with them in distance learning. So we learned a lot about distance learning several years ago through the pandemic, but now is the time to engage students in distant learning, to use all the technology and tools that we are equipped with, and continue to check in with families and communicate with families if they're fearful of leaving their home. So, how can we support our students that are experiencing anxiety? The first is to pay attention to students' emotions and behavior and look for signs of anxiety. So, this may include difficulty concentrating or focusing, feeling overwhelmed, any changes in appetite or sleep patterns, and any withdrawal from activities that they once enjoyed. So, right now, during this time of uncertainty, it's important that you, as an educator, manage the expectations that you have of your students. So, you can provide them with extra time on assignments and provide extra breaks throughout your class time. And then you can also engage the entire classroom and incorporate activities that will help de-stress students. So these are some examples that you can do with the entire classroom, such as incorporating grounding exercises. You can have students, if they're able to, sit on the ground, uh, create a calming space, play some relaxing music, and let everyone just sit calmly, quietly, seated on the ground while listening to relaxing music. That's an example of a grounding exercise, as well as practicing deep breathing in the classroom. And also thinking of other ways to incorporate relaxation, such as nature walks. If you're able to take your students out to do a walk in nature, or allowing extra time for them to color or express themselves through art. You could hang positive quotes around the classroom. You could uh, have hot cocoa or something that they could have as a treat in their classroom. Really just thinking about ways that you can continue to incorporate joy and happiness in the classroom, and also relaxation for students that are experiencing anxiety and stress. But remember to keep it simple. There are many ideas, and you know your students best, in ways that you can introduce more exercises for them to de-stress. So let's take a moment to really understand immigrant student stress. Some potential immigrant student stressors include bullying. It can include academic stress. They may have expectations as a family member within their own family to care for their siblings or care for children, or possibly provide caregiving to an elder. There may be financial concerns in the family that the student is stressed about. The student could possibly be stressed because of their own identity. So maybe their faith background, or their race, or their country of origin, or their gender or sexuality. Or it could be because of existing family separation or fears of family separation. So again, there are many reasons as to why immigrant students could be stressed. But really, it's a mental health professional who will be able to address the specific stressors the student has and identify the specific stressors. So like I mentioned, it's important that you be careful as an educator to not project your own stresses and anxiety about immigration onto children and youth, because again, they could be stressed for many reasons, possibly not due uh, to immigration or fears of family separation, but possibly because they're being a victim of bullying. So really just paying attention to the student and connecting them with mental health professionals. So the first step to connecting them is try to connect the student to a school psychologist or a counselor. And if you're unable to do that, then speak to leadership about mental health resources in your district. You can also join existing mental health networks in Massachusetts to stay informed of best practices and additional resources. And you can also engage in advocacy to expand sustainable mental health resources in your school and district if there aren't any currently. Just as a resource here, we know that the Boston Public Schools Department of Behavioral Health Services has 69 school psychologists. And the Massachusetts School Mental Health Consortium works to build comprehensive school mental health systems across Massachusetts. So they're an organization to reach out to if you're looking for more, to build more comprehensive mental health systems in your district. So maybe you're thinking, Catherine, I understand that. However, students are coming to me personally and they're speaking to me. Well, that's great. If you feel comfortable, then you can continue to be a safe and confidential person that that student can speak to. If you don't feel comfortable, then possibly find a mentor for that student to speak to. But if you do decide to continue to be the person that the child speaks to, while speaking to them, encourage them to make goals for themselves. So encourage them to still have goals and dreams, but also create a backup plan in case life changes. So what are their goals currently as a student? What were their dreams of possibly graduating high school and their dream after? And can they make an alternative plan if things were to change for themselves or their family, or they had to relocate? And this may be a difficult topic to talk about, but it's important that students still maintain their future goals and dreams and have a positive outlook for their futures. And you also may be one of the only people that they trust to speak about their goals and their dreams. So really just taking that opportunity to help them think it out, think of a plan A and a plan B. You can also introduce students to tools on being adaptable and dealing with uncertainty and being resilient. So there are more resources online about dealing with uncertainty and being resilient. But some examples that you can tell the student is to limit their exposure to the news, to focus on what they can control, and to maintain a routine. So possibly if they have a routine at home, or even if they have a routine at school, how can they continue to focus on what they control and focus on their daily routine? And also speaking about journaling. So maybe journaling is a helpful outlet for students during this time to think about their thoughts and get their thoughts on paper. So whatever other examples you can introduce to the student is helpful. Now, We always emphasize that when you're talking with students, that you share stories of strength and power. So share stories of resilient immigrants in literature, media, or in the community. So this is why being an educator is so exciting, because you get to think about what materials to introduce your students to. So the Immigrant Learning Center actually has stories about immigrants on their website for teachers specifically. So they have categorized it by grade levels, but you are able to go onto their website and find specific stories for your students based on their reading levels. And so this is a really great way to incorporate more stories of resiliency and strength for your students to read together as a classroom. And in addition to that, I provided some more examples of media. The first is for children who are experiencing fears of family separation or may have already experienced family separation. So again, if a child that one of your students comes to you, or you hear about their family, and you feel it's appropriate to share this book with them or share it with their family, there are 2 children's books that talk about family separation, and they both can be, there are links to them being read out loud on YouTube, so they're very accessible. And then I would like to share with you some more resources for youth and adults, young adults. But the first is a 7-minute animated Know Your Rights video in English and Spanish. So that talks to youth about, what to do if immigration comes to your home, and why it's important for your family to prepare and create an emergency plan. And I say this to you again, if a youth that you're working with has come to you and shared with you their fears of family separation or their concerns, um, then you can consider if it's appropriate to share this video with them or share with their family. But really waiting for students to come to you to speak to you about what it is they're worried about. And additionally, there is an article about an individual that was undocumented and was able to graduate from his academic program. So that is a great story to share with students. And then in addition to that, there are videos on the Immigrant Rising website. And so there is now a community of adults that live outside of the United States and are coming forward and sharing their stories about what their life is like now living outside of the United States. So what that means is they were in the United States previously, and due to immigration purposes, they were either forced to leave or they chose to leave. And so what does their life look like outside of the United States? And so there are some video blogs about their stories. So this can help particularly youth and young adults as they're thinking about their plan A and their plan B, and what their life would look like outside of the country if they had to relocate, but still thinking about their goals and their dreams. Now, if you are communicating with parents, we really do encourage that you first validate their experiences. So families are coming to you, they're sharing with you their concerns about their children, their concerns about themselves as parents. Validate their experiences and hear them out. But if they have any legal questions, if parents are coming to you with legal questions, explain to them that you are unable to answer legal questions or provide legal advice since you are not a lawyer. But instead, we ask that you share resources such as our multilingual recorded videos on Know Your Rights that are available in English, Spanish, Portuguese, and Haitian Creole. And so schools are holding screenings of our recordings in their schools for parents after school during a time when parents are invited to the school. So thinking creatively of how you can either email the recordings to parents or when parents are on the school campus, providing them with these videos in their native language if available. And then in addition to that, we have posters and flyers, handouts to hand out to parents. And we also have a family preparedness packet, which I'm going to talk about later. But essentially, this family preparedness packet is printable, or you could email it to a family. But it can help them prepare an emergency plan in case their family is separated. And I also want to let you all know that we have an immigration helpline here at Mirror Coalition. So what that means is that you are able to call this number here or go to the immigration helpline website with any general immigration questions that you may have, and we'll be able to follow up with you. So we learned about how to support immigrant students and their families. But now we're going to take the time to think about developing internal protocols at your school. Now, this comes from the Massachusetts Office of Attorney General. And essentially, something your school can do is consider revising enrollment policies. So consider collecting only the information necessary to verify the student's age and residence. You can also accept a range of documents and methods to verify the child's age. So that could include a birth certificate or an affidavit from a parent if there is no birth certificate available. And this would be to confirm also that the child lives in the district. So thinking of a range of documents that a family can use to confirm that the child lives in the district. And do not collect or maintain documents that contain passport information or visa information and social security numbers, as this creates additional data protection obligations. It's also important to inform families that they can opt out or ask to remove their information from school websites or online school directories or your school's social media accounts. So number one, you can consider limiting the type of information that your school designates as directory information. And you can also consider limiting the share of directory information to school community members. And some examples of information that parents can ask to limit is their student's name, their student's phone number, their student's grade level, the date of attendance that their child has been attending the school, and possibly any other information that could be found on social media such as a student's participation in sports or a certain activity, or any awards or honors that the student may have received. And so we say this because possibly a family doesn't want the general public to be able to Google their family information, their child's information online, and know that they attend that school in that district. So they can just informing them that they can opt out. They can ask that that information be removed from the school website or the school social media. If they don't want a photo of their child receiving that award or a photo of themselves and their child at that sports event. And if the student's parent or guardian has limited English proficiency, the district must utilize translation or interpretation services to communicate this information to them. Now, we often receive the question of how do we safeguard our student information? So the first is to conduct a deep dive of internal organizational data and technology use policies. So really thinking about how does our organization, our school, how does it maintain data and how are we using our technology? These are conversations that you can have with your IT teams about cybersecurity policies or who has access to certain softwares and certain information and who is uh, is able to see that information. But I want to remind everyone um, that we have things like the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, also called FERPA, that protects students' education records, which schools generally may not produce without taking certain steps to notify the student or parent. Very similarly, we also have the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, also known as HIPAA, that protects individually identifiable health information, which generally can only be disclosed after notifying the parent or obtaining the patient's authorization. But it's important that your school create a protocol to respond to a subpoena. So records generally do not need to be produced immediately, even if there is a subpoena, and schools must make reasonable efforts to notify families. So, how can your school prepare in advance if immigration enforcement arrives? Well, first, you can speak with leadership about their decisions and what the internal protocols are within your school. So some schools may want to train all front desk staff on protocols, but some may want to identify a point person to call. So if an ICE agent requests access to a student, the school should refer that agent to the district's central office. And schools can direct ICE to speak with the superintendent. Superintendents should contact the district's legal counsel to discuss the appropriate response before proceeding. And the school or district should also immediately notify the student's parent or guardian. Now, I want to walk us through a scenario. So let's say someone enters the school through the front main office lobby and they say they are looking for a specific student or even a staff member. Now, the front desk receptionist needs to be trained to ask for identification. So they're not going to give information to just anyone. They're going to want to say, well, can you identify yourself? And let's say that this individual identifies themselves as ICE or law enforcement. And I say this because ICE or law enforcement could come to the school dressed in casual clothing. They could come in a t-shirt and jeans, and you wouldn't be able to naturally recognize that they're ICE or law enforcement. So the front desk receptionist asks for identification, their name, their agency, their ID. And if this person identifies themselves as police or law enforcement, and they're looking for a particular student or staff member, then the front desk receptionist can say, I'm not personally authorized to allow you entry into the school or release information. Let me connect you with the school's principal, district's central office, or superintendent. We follow district policy and cannot provide any information without consulting legal counsel. So that is an option that in a protocol that you can have at your front desk. And in this example, the front desk receptionist would be trained to call for help, call somebody such as the principal or the superintendent for more support. I want to share with you a separate scenario. So again, someone enters a school through the main office lobby and they say they're looking for a specific student or a staff member. This time, the front desk receptionist is trained to ask for identification and asks for their name, their agency ID, and they identify themselves as ICE or law enforcement. Now, once this happens, the receptionist can ask to see a judicial warrant with the name of the student or the staff member that they are searching for. The name should be correctly spelled on the warrant, or the warrant should have the address of the school. The front desk receptionist should confirm that the warrant is issued by a court and has a judge signature. And ICE may have an administrative warrant. So they might bring a different piece of paper that's an administrative warrant, not a warrant signed by a judge. So it's really important to look at the piece of paper and make sure that there's a signature by a judge and that is issued by a court. You do not need to grant access based on an administrative warrant that they might bring. That is an internal warrant that they have. But again, that's an administrative warrant. We're looking for a judicial warrant that is issued by a court and signed by a judge. So again, we're looking to see, is the name of the student or staff member spelled correctly on the warrant? And is it signed by a judge? We're also looking to see if the warrant is issued by a court. So looking for example, United States District Court. And looking to see if it is signed by a judge. So this is enlarged so that we can zoom in to this document. And under the signature is the printed name and title of the judge. So you would need to look very carefully on the document underneath the signature to see the printed name and title and see that it is signed by a judge. Now, let's say that they do not have a warrant signed by a judge. If that's the case, then an ICE officer or law enforcement cannot enter a private area of the school without consent. So let's talk about what is considered private and public. Now, it could very well be that your school building, the entire school building, is considered private and closed to the public. However, it could also mean that spaces like the main office or the lobby or cafeteria or an auditorium or parking lot could be considered public space, because these are typically spaces that the community is invited to and welcomed to enter without needing to show identification of who they are or to sign in. But really, this depends on your school. So, thinking about the internal policies at your school and how you use this space at the school. Is there typically a space that someone needs to check into before they enter the lobby or the main office, or can the general community enter? But when thinking about private spaces, think about a teacher's lounge or a classroom or a school bus, because these are generally considered private spaces, and general public, including parents, are usually not permitted in those spaces. But you can also clearly mark private offices and rooms with a sign that says private. But thinking about how the school uses those spaces, are certain rooms locked during certain times, or do you need a key or a badge to enter those spaces? So if you do, those would be considered private spaces. And if you are an employer and you are concerned about your employees who are immigrants, we ask that you review the National Immigrant Law Center's guidance for employers. And I want to share with you one more scenario. So let's say an ICE agent arrives at a school or a school-sponsored event. For example, a sports event or music event, but they do not enter the school through the front door, the main office, or anywhere near the main office. What you can do is, if you are part of leadership in the school, you can meet the agent at the entrance of the school or the entrance of the event and keep them outside. Of course, unless doing so would allow the agent to speak with students without first being granted access. But if possible, meet the agent and direct them someplace away from students and family. So we learned about how to support immigrant students and their families, and then we discussed internal protocols that you and your school can think about incorporating, or review and revise. As a reminder, if you have any questions, we encourage you to use the Q&A function, and these slides and recording will be shared out to everyone after the webinar. So now I will be talking about Know Your Rights, and a lot of this information is what we share out to immigrant adults, and we have this information available on our website in English, Spanish, Haitian Creole, and Portuguese. So let's learn about the immigration system. There are three main agencies in the Department of Homeland Security. The first is the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, and the second is Customs and Border Protection, and the third is Immigration and Customs Enforcement. So USCIS reviews applications and conducts interviews for those seeking asylum or applying for a green card or a special visa or renewing their work permits or applying for citizenship. So in this image here, this individual is receiving a letter from USCIS, and they're possibly being invited to go in person at the local USCIS offices nearest to their home, for an in-person interview. So this shows that USCIS routinely communicates with those that are applying and have certain applications. Now, USCIS can grant status to people who qualify, but they can also deny applications. I now want to talk about Customs and Border Protection, also known as CBP. So they patrol the border within 100 miles of the United States border. And if you see on this map here in yellow are the areas that are within 100 miles of the border. And if you see Massachusetts is nearly covered within the 100-mile radius. So what does this mean? This means that you could potentially be driving, for example, and come across a sign like the sign, the yellow sign here that says enforcement zone. So you could be driving and you could potentially see US Customs and Border Protection enforcement zone. And if you're driving in an enforcement zone, you may be pulled over and asked additional questions about your immigration status. And you would be required to answer those questions. Now, enforcement zones have existed in other states. In the United States, if we hear of any enforcement zones in Massachusetts, we will let everyone know. I now want to talk about Immigration and Customs Enforcement, also known as ICE. They are the ones that conduct immigration arrests, detention, and deportation removals. So in this image, this individual is wearing a vest that says police ICE. However, they can be dressed in casual clothing, such as a t-shirt and jeans, and drive unmarked vehicles when attempting to make an immigration arrest. So how do people come in contact with immigration enforcement? Well, the first is through contact with the criminal system, or when applying for a benefit at USCIS while having a removal order or a criminal charge. It can also be through raids and targeted enforcement. And who is at risk of deportation? It can be anyone who is not a US citizen, can be vulnerable if they fall under a ground of deportation, such as criminal charges or a prior order of deportation. And this can include those that are unauthorized or undocumented immigrants, people with asylum or refugee status or some other form of protection. It can also include lawful permanent residents and non-immigrants, such as those here on a student visa or a travel visa. What are some reasons for deportation? Well, the first, it can be lack of lawful status. So possibly someone is undocumented or they've overstayed a visa. Or it could be due to criminal grounds, including nearly all drug convictions, some domestic violence convictions, and violations of a protection order. Also, some theft and fraud convictions. It can also be due to immigration violations or fraud in the immigration system, or through security-related grounds, such as gang involvement in terrorism. And sometimes minor and nonviolent offenses can lead to mandatory deportation, even for green card holders. Now, I want to provide to you an update. The Trump administration has announced that it will move to quickly deport individuals who entered without permission and have been in the United States for less than 2 years, without giving them the opportunity to go in front of an immigration judge unless they pass an initial asylum screening. So what does this mean? This means is if someone entered the United States without permission, but they have been in the United States for more than 2 years, they should carry proof of that, such as proof of residence, proof of school or work or medical records. And these documents do not need to be notarized. So again, it's important that those that entered without permission and have been here for more than 2 years carry around some form of documentation that shows that they've been here in the United States for more than 2 years. And this can include school records. If the individual has been in the United States for less than 2 years, but are already in deportation proceedings or have valid parole status, they should carry evidence of that. Immigration could still try to place that individual in this fast deportation process, but would first have to take steps to close out their immigration court proceedings or end their parole. If they have a pending immigration court case, they can check the status of it online every day to check for any changes. We've provided links here. They should also contact a lawyer or seek legal services if they see any changes. And we as advocates are already pushing back on this broad application of the expedited removal process, and we will keep you updated. So, as a reminder, it's important to carry documents. If you have valid immigration documents and you are over the age of 18, such as a green card if you're a lawful permanent resident, the law requires that you carry those documents on you. So you're over the age of 18, you have valid immigration documents, the law requires that you carry it on you, such as a green card. But as I mentioned earlier, if you entered the US without permission and you've been in the United States for more than 2 years, you should carry proof that you've been here. It can be an ID card, it can be an expired ID, really any document that can prove you've been here for more than 2 years. And we've received the question before of, what if I'm a naturalized citizen? Well, the law does not require that you carry documentation, but if you would prefer, you can carry with you your driver's license or identification or your real ID or memorize your social security number, but never provide false documents. So I now want to talk about knowing our rights when interacting with immigration enforcement. These are the messages that we share out to immigrant adults throughout Massachusetts. And really, it is if immigration comes to your home, you do not need to open the door unless the officer provides you with a warrant signed by a judge. So earlier we learned what a warrant signed by a judge looks like. And the same applies in the home. Ask the officer to identify themselves, their agency, their name, their ID. Ask if they have a warrant signed by a judge. And then immigrants can slide a Know Your Rights card under the door or press it up against the window. And I'm going to share with you what those Know Your Rights cards are. Um, you have the right to remain silent and to an attorney. So you do not have to answer any questions about your immigration status or when you entered the country. And you can state to the officers, I request my right to silence and to an attorney. And it is best to call a US citizen friend or family or an attorney. So these are the Know Your Rights cards. This is what it looks like on the front side and the back side. So the front side reminds you that of your constitutional rights to not open the door, to not answer any questions, to not sign anything. And it reminds you to give the card to the agent under the door or press it up against the window. And these are available in over 12 languages, and they can be printed from our website. Now, the other side of the card is what would be shown to the ICE officer. And it says, I do not wish to speak with you. I do not give you permission to enter my home, and I do not give you permission to search any of my belongings. I choose to exercise my constitutional rights. So what is great about this tool is that immigrants don't necessarily need to know how to speak the words on the Know Your Rights cards. They can use these printable wallet-sized cards, so they're available to print. And they can use this as a non-verbal tool to still assert their rights. And again, it's important to carry this around in your wallet or your purse, have it near your door, in your home, or have it in your car. If law enforcement does not have a warrant issued by the court that is signed by a judge, then they cannot enter your home. Lock all doors and windows. Call a lawyer or a US family member or friend for support. And you or others can choose to audio record or video record what is happening in case ICE violates your rights. I want to talk about driver's license briefly. So in Massachusetts, we are still celebrating the fact that driver's license are available to Massachusetts residents regardless of immigration status. So possibly the students that you work with or their families may be eligible to get a driver's license regardless of their immigration status. But we want to remind everyone that you should only be driving with a full driver's license, not a permit, because if you are driving with a permit, it is against the law to be driving alone. With a permit, you must drive with someone in the car who has been driving for over a year, is over the age of 21, and is sitting next to the driver. So this is really important to share with youth, high school age students who are thinking about getting a driver's license because they qualify, but really reminding them that they should only be driving alone if they have a full driver's license. So what should someone do if they're stopped when driving? The first is stay in the car and place your hands on the steering wheel. The driver must provide their own name and address. However, passengers do not need to answer any questions. And if you can show the Know Your Rights card to the officer. Now, police can search the vehicle if they believe you have been involved in a crime, but you can say, I do not consent to this search. Again, they can still search your vehicle if they believe you've been involved in a crime. but never provide false documents. As I mentioned earlier regarding Border Patrol, there are different rules that apply at immigration checkpoints and at ports of entry. So I am speaking about this if you were stopped when driving and it is not at an immigration checkpoint or port of entry. So what to do if immigration or police stops you in public? The first is to stay calm, do not run or resist arrest, and say, am I under arrest or am I free to leave? You can remain silent. You can say, I want to speak to a lawyer. Can I call a lawyer? And a reminder, if you have valid documentation, the law requires that you carry that on you and you show it to immigration if asked. Police can search you if they have reasonable suspicion that you are armed and dangerous. But think about your safety. So we share with you immigrant rights when interacting with law enforcement and immigration officials. However, it is your decision if you feel safe to assert your rights, if you feel like the time and place and those you have around you are able to support you. But if you ever find yourself alone driving at night and you don't feel comfortable, that is your decision. Now I want to talk about you if you ever find yourself a bystander. So if you ever find yourself witnessing immigration enforcement make an arrest or attempt to make an arrest, what you can do as a bystander is you can recite the constitutional rights. You can remind everyone of their rights. You can try to de-escalate the situation in any way that you may be able to. And you could provide support by making a call for the family, possibly calling a U.S. citizen family member of theirs or a U.S. citizen friend, or helping them call an attorney. You can also record what the ICE agents are doing because you may be able to prove that the agents violated the family rights. And if you know of someone that has been detained, you can use the online detainee locator to find where someone is being detained. I now want to talk about family preparedness. And this is particularly important for immigrant families, for their students, for the students that you work with and their parents. So these are the family preparedness packets. They are available in English, Spanish, Portuguese, and Haitian Creole on our website. And essentially, they help parents have conversations with their children. Now, earlier, I spoke to you about how to speak to students, how to speak to children and youth, always leading with stories of strength, resiliency, and power. When speaking to parents, speak to them by sharing resources, by helping them answer any questions that they have about the resources. But really, it's through the family preparedness packets that encourage families, parents, to have those conversations with their children. So possibly parents haven't had conversations with their children before. Maybe children don't know about their own immigration status. They don't know the truth behind the immigration status of their parents or their family members. These conversations are private conversations that families need to have within their own family. And that's why it's important that you share resources with parents so that they are equipped to have those conversations with their children. It is not best to alarm students or children because, again, children and youth may not know the details of their own immigration status, the details of their family's immigration status, or know if their family is concerned about immigration. But if particularly older youth come to you and they voice that they've, overheard their parents talking about immigration or that they are concerned about immigration, then that's when you can engage in dialogue with students, but really emphasizing that these conversations should be had at home among the family first. So these family preparedness packets allow the parents to think about what would happen if the family were separated. So they're sitting down with their children. They're saying, for these reasons, we are concerned about immigration coming to our home. And maybe because of your status as my child, it could also be because of my status as your parent or another family member's status. And it allows parents to decide who will take care of their children in their absence. It allows parents to think about their child's educational, medical, and emotional needs and how those would be taken care of in their absence and their plans for reunification. So, has the family already thought about how they will reunite if they are separated due to immigration? As part of the plan, it reminds families to speak to their school to update any emergency contact information of trusted adults that they've identified to pick up their children from school in case they are unable to. It also reminds families to speak to the school to ask that their information be removed from social media or anywhere online that they don't want their information. And it reminds families that they can register their child's birth with their foreign consulate if they've decided that they want their child to travel or move to their home country. They can also apply for passports for their child or write a travel letter. So by applying for a passport for the child, if the child is eligible to receive a passport, or by writing a travel letter, this will help when thinking about reuniting in a different country and also registering the child's birth with the foreign consulate. So family preparedness also includes practicing and asserting your rights, the rights that we talked about earlier, but also memorizing phone numbers of family or friends or a lawyer, and thinking about a US citizen or someone with immigration status that you can trust who can pay bond if you're granted one by an immigration judge. I now want to share with you parental rights. So parents have the right to make decisions about their children, no matter their immigration status. They have the right to not share information about their children, but if they are the main caretaker, they might want to tell immigration. Parents have the right to arrange who will take care of their child. And if detained, parents can ask for a phone call and ask how to contact their children. If children are in foster care, then parents can take part in child welfare meetings while in detention and even after deportation, unless they have lost parental rights. I now want to talk to you about 4 options that parents have regarding who can take care of their children. So as I mentioned before, it's important for families and parents think about a trusted adult to take care of their children if they are unable to, if they've been separated due to immigration. So the first is an informal option. This is when a parent identifies a trusted adult, possibly it's another family member, it's an aunt or an uncle, or it's a neighbor or someone in the church, just their church that they trust. And they speak to them and say, "You are a trusted adult that I trust to take care of my children if I'm unable to." Now, this can be done verbally or it can be written down on a piece of paper. But um, because this is done verbally and it's more of an informal option, this does not give the trusted adult legal rights to the child's school or doctor. So for example, I use the example that I'm a godmother, I have godsons. By being a godmother, that does not provide me with legal rights to my godson's school or doctor. I'm going to now talk about 2 options that are found in the family preparedness packet. The forms are within the family preparedness packet. The first is the caregiver authorization affidavit, and this gives the trusted adult the right to make decisions about the child's health care and education for up to 2 years. The parents would keep all rights and can end it at any time. For this, it needs the signature of 1 adult and 2 witnesses, and it must be notarized. The other option is the temporary agent authorization, which allows the trusted adult to make any decisions a parent can make, including about property and finances. And this is valid for 60 days, but can be renewed. For this, both parents must sign if they're available, and it must be signed by the trusted adult and 2 witnesses. It does not need to be notarized. And the last option is guardianship. So this is when the legal guardian has all the rights a parent has and would exercise the rights to the children instead of the parent. So this would be obtained through the courts. We also are reminding immigrant families that it's important to organize your documents. Organize important documents in your home, have them stored in a file, folder, or a binder, or any place in your home that is easy to access, but is still safe and organized. And the reason being is that many of these documents may be important in case of an emergency. So some of these important documents include family passports, birth certificates, marriage licenses, social security cards, or emergency contact information, or any of those forms that I talked about earlier around caregiver authorization affidavit or temporary agent authorization. Whatever documents the family has that they can keep organized. It's important that families are opening their mail, especially if they're receiving mail from USCIS or any immigration related mail and documents, and really making sure that they're keeping up to date on upcoming appointments or hearings and that they don't miss any appointments. But making sure that other family members know where to access these documents in case of emergency or in case they need to access them quickly. I now want to talk about where to get legal help. So there are two main people that you should go to, or immigrants should go to seek advice about, to seek legal advice. So the first is an attorney or lawyer who has a valid license to practice law in the United States. And the second is an accredited representative. And this is someone that works for a nonprofit organization who has received training and special authorization from the United States government to help people with immigration cases. Now, immigrants should not be listening to notary publics or notarios because they are not lawyers and they cannot provide legal advice. They should also not be listening to interpreters or tax preparers about legal advice. So interpreters may translate important documents needed for immigration cases, but they cannot provide legal advice because they are not attorneys or lawyers. So what happens is that the immigrant community often pays these individuals money, a great deal of money, and they wait for their immigration case or application, and they find out that they've lost a lot of time and that they've lost a lot of money. So we remind everyone to only seek legal advice from an attorney or a lawyer or an accredited representative, but to not be giving notary publics or interpreters or tax preparers money to help with your application for your immigration case or seek legal advice from them because they are not authorized to do so. And what ends up happening is you lose a lot of time on your case and you lose a lot of money. So if you have been a victim to fraud or you know anyone that has been victim to this type of fraud, we've provided some phone numbers and emails where to report, to file a complaint if you've been a victim to fraud. And then we also encourage that you go to the Massachusetts Legal Resource Finder if you are looking for legal resources in Massachusetts. And I provided a QR code here and links will be shared out after the presentation. And also the city of Boston has free consultations as well. But if you are looking for legal services outside of Massachusetts, to use the Immigration Advocates Network legal directory. So because I'm speaking to K-12 educators, I would be remiss not to talk about tuition equity. So I'm going to share with you a little bit about tuition equity today. So we are still celebrating the fact that we have made a historic victory in Massachusetts on July 1st, 2023. After 22 years of dedicated immigrant advocacy, we now have tuition equity here in Massachusetts. And this was because of all the great advocacy that happened in Massachusetts. Many organizations and people were involved. So what is tuition equity? It's the new tuition equity law gives nearly all undocumented Massachusetts high school graduates access to in-state tuition rates at public colleges and universities in Massachusetts. And it makes these students eligible for state-funded student financial aid to attend a public or private Massachusetts college or university. To be eligible, a student must have attended a high school, Massachusetts high school during at least 3 academic years. And they must have received a high school diploma or GED in Massachusetts. And they must be admitted to a Massachusetts public college or university for in-state tuition and state financial aid, or a private Massachusetts nonprofit college or university for state financial aid. Now, this does not apply to non-immigrants. So that is for those here in the United States on a student visa or a travel visa or a temporary worker. In order to access these funds, a student must complete an eligibility form. They must complete the tuition equity form and affidavit. And they will need to provide the higher education institution with one of the following. So they will need to either provide a valid social security number or evidence that they've been issued an ITIN, an individual tax identification number, or they need to state that they will apply for legal permanent residency if and when they're eligible for it within 100 days of eligibility. So I underlined the important keywords here that if and when a student became eligible for applying for legal permanent residency, they would apply for it within 120 days of eligibility. Or the other option is documentation of registering with the Selective Service if eligible. So I just provided the 4 options that students have, and they must choose one. So after the student fills out the tuition equity form and affidavit, and they submit it to their institution, the students can use the online portal to complete the Massachusetts application for state financial aid. Once the student, the tuition equity form and affidavit and MAFSA have been submitted, the student will immediately be eligible for in-state tuition rate and be considered for all non-need-based tuition waivers and all non-need-based financial aid. So which form should students be completing? Well, on the left is the free application for federal student aid, known as FAFSA. And in order to complete FAFSA, a student must be a US citizen or permanent resident, or refugee or asylee, or have one of the statuses detailed here. But for the Massachusetts application for state financial aid, this is the new application that is available because of tuition equity. So this is for undocumented students or those with deferred action for childhood arrivals, also known as DACA, or those with temporary protected status. And the reason that MAFSA was created was because these students were ineligible for FAFSA. So undocumented students, those with DACA and those with TPS, were ineligible to apply for FAFSA. And now, due to the Massachusetts application for state financial aid, they are eligible to receive financial aid through the state. So students should not be filling out two forms. They should not be filling out FAFSA and MAFSA. Again, based on their own status, they would only qualify for one or the other. But this does not apply to students that are here on a travel visa or a student visa or temporary workers, because those individuals are not eligible for either FAFSA or MAFSA. And this is what the online portal looks like when completing the MAFSA application. I encourage you all to check out our website. We do have a guide for students and their families, and it's available in English, Spanish, Portuguese, and Haitian Creole. And it covers the steps on how undocumented students in Massachusetts are able to receive in-state tuition and financial support. With that being said, as I am reaching the end of this presentation, I would like to invite everyone to review those family preparedness packets, review it yourself so that you know what is in the packets, and so that you are more comfortable to share the packets with parents and to be able to speak to parents about what is in the family preparedness packets. Again, they're available in English, Spanish, Haitian Creole, and Portuguese. This QR code will bring you to our Know Your Rights webpage. And also you as educators to share our recordings of the Know Your Rights trainings with parents if you're able to. Those are available in English, Spanish, Haitian Creole, and Portuguese. And use this training as a resource to refer back to and answer any questions. That being said, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I want to thank everyone for coming to this presentation. I want to thank all educators for the work that you do, for your interest in supporting immigrant students and their families, and for taking the time to learn more ways that you can be of resource to families. We will be sharing this recording out to all those that registered, as well as additional resources via email. So again, I thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming today and learning about Know Your Rights and best practices as an educator.